Hi, I'm Evan Shapiro. Welcome back to Streaming Media Connect 2023, and a really excellent panel that we have here on niche media in streaming. First, a little busy work before we get started. The first person who can correctly name the track and the act who was just playing during our walk-on music, who hasn't won before, Beth, will win a $50 gift certificate from Amazon, courtesy of Streaming Media Connect. So you have to, but crucially, you have to be here at the end of the panel. So it's not enough to name the artist and the track, but you also have to be present at the end of the panel. Secondarily, all of the content from this week's Streaming Media Connect will be up on YouTube, the Streaming Media Connect YouTube page, I think by the end of today, if not all of it by tomorrow. Steve will put the link in the chat. Also, really important, you can chat in the chat and look for important links there, like links to our LinkedIn pages and also information about the panel itself. But keep your chat over in the chat. If you have questions for myself or any of the panelists, put that in the Q&A. We will only ask the questions that get in the Q&A because that's where the questions go, the Q and the A. And lastly, I want to make sure that you circle the date for May 20th through 22nd, 2024, right here in New York City. We're going to be doing Streaming Media NYC in real life, IRL, with me as host and chair at the Intercontinental Hotel Barclays here in Manhattan, center of the media universe. I hope you can join us here. It's going to be a really great time with panels and keynotes and a ton of other events and super activities and networking going on. We are now taking submissions for speakers and panelists, so that link will also be in the chat. Check it out, submit if you want to speak or you have a panel that you'd like to recommend. And then with that said, I'd like to bring to the stage all of my panelists: Marion Ranchet, Cameron Salas, Chris Knight, Philippe Guelton, and Evan Bregman, or Bregman, if that's French. A ton of French folks on this panel. And this is our panel, the Building Growing Niche OTT Services in FAST and OTT. So I want to start by introducing you all by allowing you to introduce yourself. Marion writes one of my favorite newsletters in streaming, Streaming Made Easier. But Marion, will you please tell us a little about what you do, what your firm does, and why you're here today?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So Marion Ranchet, I'm the founder of the local Consultancy, and essentially I help streaming video services to launch and grow in Europe. So Europe made easy in 3 words.
There you go. Philippe, I'm going to go from French person to French person. Philippe Guelton. Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment. We produce content, we distribute and license content to a lot of streaming platforms, but we also have our own consumer-facing brands like Crackle and Chicken Soup for the Soul. They are both AVOD, and as well as Redbox. Redbox puts us in a unique position because while we were used to syndicating our own FAST channels to other platforms, Redbox has a built-in FAST platform. So we also aggregate FAST platforms on FAST channels on behalf of their third parties. So an exciting time for us.
Cool. I'm going to stay outside the country and go to Chris Knight from Gusto. Chris, you want to talk about what you do and what Gusto does?
Sure. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Chris Knight. I work at Gusto TV. We are a food channel. We're based in Canada, currently available for your viewing pleasure on, I think it's 47 different platforms in 162 countries. 4 months ago, we launched the Spanish language version of the channel, and we are available throughout Latin America the old-fashioned way on cable and satellite. And one of the things about Gusto is that everything you see on the channel, we produce ourselves. So we are, in food parlance, a tail-to-snout operation. We're foodies and content producers at heart.
Tail-to-snout operation, is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay, so I like that. And Cameron, did I say your last name correctly? Salas?
Salas.
Salas. I apologize for that. Well, as a Shapiro who gets called Shapiro all the time, I feel like I have to ask. Cameron, tell us about what you're up to and what Trusted Media Brands is up to. I know it's been a transition year for the operation that you run there.
It's been a couple of years now since
Thank you.
Yeah. So Cameron Solis, I'm the Chief Business Officer at Trusted Media Brands, and we operate a portfolio of brands in lifestyle entertainment. I think a lot of people probably know our brands, Taste to Home, Family Handyman, People Are Awesome, Pet Collective. Basically, we engage, really passionate communities within food and pets and DIY, and we do it across a variety of different platforms. We have scale in print, we have scale in digital web, we have social, we have streaming, and we reach all those folks through the programming that we produce and curate.
Awesome. And since we are at capacity for people from outside the United States, we're also at our capacity of Evans. So last but not least, Evan Bregman, General Manager at Tastemade. Tell us what you do there and what Tastemade is up to for those who do not know.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Tastemade is an 11-year-old modern media company. We make lifestyle shows, food, travel, home and design. We have 4 channels in the US, food, travel, home and design, and then Tastemade en Español, and then several other internationally, including a locally produced channel, Tastemade in Brazil, out of Sao Paulo. We're one of the most distributed brands in this world, and I joined the company about a year ago. Excited to be here talking to all of you.
Awesome. So let me start with Marion, and I want to, since you do live and operate outside the U.S., but also your last job inside a company, I believe, was at Roku, if that's correct. And so I think you bring kind of a fresh set of eyes to this conversation that isn't an operator. Neither you or I are operators, but I think understanding what niche platforms mean to you in the streaming ecosystem, as opposed to the bigger kind of more corporate driven brands.
Yeah, so I would call these guys, niche heroes. I think at the end of the day, it's all about having the big brands. When you've ticked that box, and that's what, a company like Roku or Samsung does, you have your list of the global guys that you want to have, and you want to have these guys, in as many markets as possible. Next up, you want to go to, the local heroes, and, that can be, fairly big guys, but very often it's very niche, very community driven services. And what I love about those is that it's not a top down approach. It's not a mainstream approach. They're really here to build something to serve, their audience, their, community. And so I'm a big proponent of what these guys do. I think they're, not it's not prominent enough. They're there, but they're not shown enough, especially because as time goes, you gotta pay $1 or $2 to be visible on most of those platforms. And yeah, I think all of these guys around this Zoom are producing their own content. They know and understand everything like the back of their hands, and I think they deserve to have platforms, whether you're talking, OTT guys, telecom operators, to actually, help them reach those audience that are very often extremely engaged, right? And at the end of the day, any platform is looking to boost engagement hours. That's the beginning of the flywheel.
Absolutely. Really smart take there. Cameron, you and I were talking the other day, and this summer, you guys announced the formulation of the Independent Streaming Alliance, which I think, to a certain extent is about kind of creating a collective strength amongst the independent and, more niche-oriented streamers. But I think, on the other hand, something that I found interesting as I was looking into the formulation of the organization was that y'all were the first to get to be on the FAST platforms. Like, you were not just you were there early. You were helped invent the platform for the most part. I think this is true. Marion was saying this about the same thing is happening in Europe, where the smaller companies are more nimble, they're more innovative, they take bigger risks to a certain extent. But what was the idea behind it? A, and B, why do you think the niche players got to FAST first, and why do you think they were the groundbreakers in the ecosystem?
Yeah, look, it's a pleasure to be with this group. This is a group of folks we've worked, we're all living parallel lives. I like to say that all the time, but we've been living parallel lives for many, many years now in this space. And yeah, I think, Marion has said it best. We're all innovators. Like if you're in a media business, you are constantly looking for new ways to reach audiences and to monetize your content. And, in the early days, I was originally at a company called Jukin Media. In the early days, like we started our business on social. We were acquiring, curating content on social media. In the early days, that was amazing. The reach you could get on Facebook and YouTube was incredible. You could build a brand relatively quickly. The engagement was off the charts. And of course, then like normal, there are challenges that come with platforms as they sort of grow. And so over time, you start to look for new places. And part of our strategy was to always take our content, which could live in a variety of different places, and try to test it out. And I think I told this story to you, Evan, before, but I think it was 2014, 2015, we had folks like Pluto and Zumo coming to us saying they were going to launch something like this. To be honest, I was very skeptical just because of the type of content we had. And, launching these things is not easy. And I remember the Zumo guys basically carting at the time, flat screens were thick back then, carting it on their backs into our office to give us the demo. And I was blown away. And they were going to launch 25 channels. We were one of 25. I gave them some short form content, and we blew the numbers. I mean, I think we were in second out of 25 channels. So for me, like that was sort of a signal. And if you fast forward to today, we have a dedicated team, 50, 60 people. We are building programming specifically, long form programming specifically for fast channels. We have built out an entire team to sell and monetize that content. I mean, it's been incredible how that's happened. But all of us, each of us in this room, have had to navigate. That's the fun of doing these things. It is the Wild West, but we've had to navigate this world and overcome a lot of issues. And I think the whole point behind the ISA is a lot of us, while we've been the beneficiaries of being early and moving quickly and investing ahead of the curve, we're all starting to see where there's some challenges coming down the road. And we all believe deeply in this ecosystem. We see huge opportunities, but we've started to highlight to others who maybe aren't seeing it, look, there's some problems out there. And we think this group can help at least start that conversation. The ISA is a collection of, I think, 10 to 15 independent companies. We're going to be adding a lot more to that list. But we're all trying to tackle different things. And we're focused really in 4 areas. We're looking at distribution, challenges around distribution. There's a lot of platforms now. There's a lot of channels. Like how do you discovery is something we should probably talk about as an example. We're looking at demand and how, media is sold and bought and distributed. We're looking at measurement. Measurement's a huge issue for advertisers and platforms and programmers alike. We're looking at diversity because we represent a lot of underrepresented audiences.
Right.
And so, look, it's early days. Like you said, we just announced this in June, but we're really bullish on the fast space, but we realize like the next layer of growth, we're going to have to solve some of these problems to really unleash the big opportunity in front of us.
Yeah, and Chris, I think so first, the niche programmers got to fast first. First from a kind of just need. I need to find new ways to monetize this content, but then secondarily, they smaller and more nimble companies are more able to innovate. And I think part of what the ISA wants to do is create some leverage for the smaller players, but pushing the innovation through the ecosystem is a big part of the initiative that you're trying to create here, correct?
True that. And, not just in our business and media business, but virtually in every industry, small companies are nimble and small companies innovate. Large companies pay dividends. It's not in their DNA to go out on a limb. Another panel for another time. It just as an example, formats. Like, there's no original ideas out there anymore. If it works in Sweden or in Brazil, then it must work here. So it is part of. I do want to say one thing though. We're on December 11th is our 10th anniversary on the air. And when we launched originally up here in Canada, we were a pay television channel on cable and satellite. At that time, I had to lease time on somebody else's master control system because it was prohibitively expensive for me to build my own for one channel in one country. We now have multiple channels in multiple languages going, as I said before, to 162 countries on over 40 platforms, from what amounts to a well-ventilated broom closet with a rack of computers in. The streaming technology was just this joyous opportunity to bring a brand and bring content to the world without having to go through the predictable gateholders or gatekeepers who would shut things down and make sure that their stuff got up there first. It was really phenomenal. If you had told me 10 years ago that Gusto would be on in as many countries as it is, I would have said, put your drink down, you've had enough. On one hand, you know, as Cameron was saying, it's the Wild West. It's been a crazy ride so far. I remember talking to the Pluto guys when they were working out of a shared office space over a bodega in Manhattan, you know, before they actually got to have an office. So that's been great. That's been tremendous. But as Cameron says, you know, it's time to take a look at where the whole thing is going and put some best practices in place.
It's interesting, you know, I think there's this misperception in the ecosystem that the more niche players, you know, don't invest as much in programming as the bigger players do. But Evan, you know, I think what I found surprising is everybody represented on this panel who's a programmer basically produces programming for FAST in a way that most of the big players don't. They're recycling programming from, you know, basically the waste bin. Old back episodes of, as I think Chris or Cameron always likes to refer to Bob Ross, or was you, Bob Ross, you know, or, you know, Cake Boss or whatever it is. But you guys in a lifestyle brand and Gusto and all the trusted media groups and Chicken Soup for the Soul and Crackle produce a tremendous amount of original programming for the ecosystem. Do you think that's table stakes, first of all, and A, for a niche brand, or increasingly for FAST, and then B, do you think it's really necessary for a niche brand to punch through to be able to understand how to economically and efficiently produce original content at scale?
Yeah, going forward, it's definitely necessary. I mean, we have benefited in ways large and small from not just making stuff, but making good stuff. You know, Tastemade won an Emmy last year in a category that included the Food Network and Netflix and every other major competitor you can imagine. Our show Struggle Meals won. This is becoming, in its next phase here, a kind of battle of brands. There is a reason that this year the channels that have been launched are no longer, people who are just seeking to extend their distribution. There's a reason that now the platforms, number one, are culling channels for the first time. And number two, the channels that they are adding are from recognizable IP. They're going to studios and saying, sure, we'll give you your 10 channels because we understand that this is going to realistically get somebody to click. The same thing will be true going forward now that we are no longer in an area of unmitigated expansion, right? Standing out is going to require original content. It's going to require giving audiences something that they can't get anywhere else. So Tastemade, we are a blend. We produce a lot of our shows. We also license a lot of our shows. We have preferred licensing arrangements and relationships with just about everybody in the marketplace. And typically when we produce a show, one of the reasons we do it is because we can't find it in the licensing world. And we still think that it speaks to our voice and the brand that we're trying to give to consumers. And so for that reason, we specifically make stuff to stick out. And going forward, I think that that's increasingly table stakes. The large media companies are at an advantage in that sense, because yes, you've heard of Westworld, and therefore it is probably likely that you're going to click on a Westworld focused single series channel as opposed to other things. Single series channels in general have somewhat of an advantage as a result of that. But I truly don't think that that is the long-term strategy, to your point. This model, though, is different. No longer are there sub fees to help us underwrite the making of that original content. And then on top of it, we're operating inside of an entertainment ecosystem that has spent the last however many years destroying a windowing model that really supported the creation of new content. The traditional studios, to your point, are now looking at FAST as a place where they can take something that they premiered in one place in a first window and made, the bulk of their revenues from it and get something ongoing from it. I think that's not really going to work in the long term. And the reason being, if you are at a major studio and you're sitting on a large content library, you are probably looking after this year at the rev share that you're getting from your 24/7 single series channel. And all it's going to take is for the distribution teams at these studios to raise their hand and saying, you're exposing my content for not very much money.
Yeah, nickels.
If you were to take it back off, I could go make one deal that would take you your next 3 years instead of exposing it like it is. That could be coming.
Yeah, and Philippe, so you're in charge of revenue there, and what Evan said about the model is interesting. There's not this, subscriber fee, lever to pull from a revenue standpoint to help your model make sense. And so when you're out there in the marketplace, and as an independent, both as an aggregator independent, I would call Redbox an independent versus the Plutos, which is owned by Paramount, and Tubi, which is owned by Fox, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Freevee, which is owned by Amazon. But also as a programming independent as well. How do you compete? What is the differentiator when you're in with the agencies and the brands and the buyers? What is your competitive advantage? Because it isn't necessarily scale. What do you say? How do you represent the channels and the platform that you represent to differentiate and put some advantage in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think there are two parts. One is, scale is important, right? And building scale is the problem of most independents, and that's why the ISA can help, because it pulls our interests together and we can bring attention to our needs. And who knows, someday maybe we'll have better terms with platforms and being able to also capture more revenue. But it goes back to what is your offering to the consumer? What do we want to offer in terms of content? And as we've said, big companies don't create original programming, certainly not for FAST or for AVOD even. They just mine their library of content, and they risk spoiling, I think, what was exciting about FAST, as a platform, by just turning that into basically a list of shows, well-known TV shows. But I think, the way we've been trying to approach it, like I think several, and if not all of us on this, is working with brands to create content as well. And so I think we have a unique opportunity to meet with brands and clients and build content that is of quality, often content that deserves to be made, that is important to be made, especially because of the diversity of our audiences. And we can do that in a nimble enough way that we're able to balance, the other big issue besides scale, which is balancing cost and revenue, right? And the investment you're making to build your channels, because being 100% original programming, like maybe a Tastemade or Gusto TV, we are partially original programming, and some of it is licensed content. It's a delicate balance that you reach. So when we approach brands, we need to bring both the creativity and of the custom content creation, as well as the scale, and the scale will come from coming together, right, as independent streamers. And you're
making a lot of show with brands. I mean, there's a couple
we're making a lot of shows. In our case, AVOD is a big driver also, so it helps us amortize that cost. Maybe some of those shows would be hard to make just for our FAST distribution. But I think we all have also to think beyond just the FAST platform, right? We all have multiple distribution channels and ways of maybe licensing the content and maybe leveraging YouTube or leveraging social. So we, I think it's important to diversify also our distribution platforms and our touch points with consumers. But FAST can be, one of the most exciting way to reach out new consumers, to promote our brands, to promote our content to them. If we have AVOD, maybe to drive them back to our apps so they can consume more of it. But we need more innovation in the user experience on the platforms as well, whether it's the EPG or how do you watch this show from the beginning, or where are the other episodes of that series. And I think on that, we rely a little bit on the main platforms and TV OEMs who, basically each build their own experience, and they're all very different from each other also. So it creates additional challenges for us as channel producers. So I think, it's we can solve for the scale issue by coming together, but we can really lead with our creativity that the big media groups, certainly can't
because you're focused, you're much more focused on this space than they are. This is kind of like a hobby for them, whereas it's the center of your business. Yeah.
For them, a good show is a $10 million, per episode budget, right? For us, we can produce 20 shows for one episode of theirs. So that's the big difference.
Marion, when you see, so you look at the fastest growing, pardon my pun, fastest growing territories for FAST in the world, are in Europe right now. So Germany is growing, kind of really quickly. Now it's from a very low base. UK is growing very quickly. Spain is growing very quickly. What are there differences in how, because there's a lag time between the growth spurt of FAST in the US and what's happened over there in Europe. So are there major differences, or are the platforms and the programmers, so a lot of it's driven by local language content, but a lot of it is coming in dubbed and subtitled on the major platforms. So are you seeing kind of the distance in space and time creating differentiation between what's happened there? Because Pluto and Samsung are infiltrating the market there, but as exemplified by Pluto combining My5 and Pluto in the UK, that's a very different take than anything that they've ever seen here. Are you seeing other kind of major nuances or differentiations between what's happening early days in FAST there and what's happening kind of in a more mature market here?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see the same, thing happen in Europe that we've seen in the US. The markets are very different, but also I was at Roku in 2019, it was the beginning, and then the pandemic hits, and all of a sudden
big spurt,
became this. So there's a lot of elements, ingredients that I think we're not going to see again in Europe. Also, because we have this lag, of a few years on pretty much everything, we tend to look at what you've done and also, tweak it.
As a cautionary tale. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. And in some cases we'll make the same mistakes, but that's kind of, the value of being number two, I would say. But I think there's also the fact that the markets are very different. When you come in the US with a free value proposition, I think it's very distinctive. In Europe, it's not.
Right.
We have tons of amazing content for free from the broadcaster. So yes, linear is going down, especially with younger audiences. There's a lot of struggles. But having said that, we have already a lot of opportunities to watch free content. Number two, in the US, I feel FAST was really boosted by the TV OEM, the connected TV ecosystem, and that's again because of cord cutting. And yes, the pay TV market is, contracting in Europe, but not bleeding out, like it
in the same way,
in the US, because it's much cheaper, right? Philippe knows, maybe he misses those days, but in France, essentially for 40 euros, you have a pay TV package with, internet, the whole shebang. So there's a lot of that at stake. Having said that, I think there's room for FAST. And I think we'll just, make it something different. So yes, you've said it, Pluto, My5. So My5 being the digital hub of the broadcaster, Channel 5, but you also see
Which is also owned by Paramount, just as
exactly.
FYI.
You also see, the local broadcaster testing. So yesterday, ITVX, they were celebrating their 1-year anniversary. They've launched, 25 to 30 channel within these last few months, and they generated like something like 25 million streaming hours. They had, in between 3 to 4 million viewers, etc., coming in and out to use that. So I think the recipe for success is going to be a bit different. But having said that, again, and that's where I think the niche services really have a play, is that if it's about copy pasting traditional TV onto fast, which this is what it started to look like, then you're just going to repeat what's happening, and people are just going to turn away. Whereas fast is the opportunity to bring new guys, right? And so new verticals, topics that were underserved. Cameron was mentioning underserved audiences. There's also a diversity play. Folks who had no say can actually have a say via fast, right? So yeah, that's a few of the things I've seen, and all of these guys here, they should be somehow in Europe, and some are, like Tastemade is, and Trusted Media. I think Gusto as well in a couple of markets. The challenge is then the fragmentation, but these guys, can speak to that. How difficult it is to grow globally when you're going beyond the English language.
Yeah. And then that gets to a larger point, and we can talk about kind of various different areas: measurement, distribution, demand, as Cameron made the point earlier. But I'll throw this open to all the programmers on this panel, with the maturation level and the fragmentation. So there's tons more channels, and this is a maturing ecosystem here in the US, although it's, from pure aggregate revenue model, going to be the biggest market in fast out there. But and Philippe mentioned this, which is, not only looking at fast, but also looking at YouTube and other platforms. As you see this market mature as it is, and you look at things like social video and digital video growing astronomically, whereas AVOD and fast, while it's growing very quickly, there is a kind of cap to the total addressable market there. How are you changing your strategies? Whether this is distribution, programming, marketing, to address a maturing market here in the US? Are you changing, for example, I'm seeing a tremendous number of these platforms adding on demand. And so does on demand become equally important to you on a platform like Pluto or Samsung or Roku, who are all seemingly kind of growing their on demand arena? Do marketing tactics change? Do you window differently between YouTube and fast, or simultaneously do you look at them as kind of co-equal spokes off the same hub? I'll throw this open to you, Cameron, if you want to take it first, since it's been a minute since you answered the last question. How are you, and you don't have to use the examples I used, but how are you evolving? How are you adapting your business? I mean, we started off by saying you guys were innovators and early movers in fast. So, how are you emulating that early mover advantage? How are you emulating that innovation cycle in your business now that you see kind of the changing nature of the ecosystem take hold?
Yeah, I mean, the principles are still the same. Like, to be successful in fast or in a media business, one, you have to build brand equity. Like, there's so much choice out there. We love the idea of choice. We want choice, but your brands have to mean something. I think part of the challenge that the fast space had, and still has, is like there's a bunch of channels that look exactly the same on a bunch of platforms, and that doesn't create a great experience for everybody. And it makes it harder for you to stand out. So, for us, it's really like continuing to build the brands, invest in the programming, build our presence in a variety of different places. I think I mentioned early on, we have tens of millions of people that pay us subscriptions in print. We have tens of millions of people that come to our websites every single month. We do billions of views on all the different social platforms. That sort of recognition. So when people land on Pack Collective or Fail Army or at home on Fast, they're like, I know what this brand is. right? Now, a big differentiator is we're not just taking the content that we have in these different platforms and slapping it on the FAST. I mean, we built out a team. Our entire team comes from television. We're building television shows, television formats, talent-driven, high production value. So you have to create a different experience there. And then you have to figure out like how to pay for all this, right? Part of that is packaging. Working with brands like Philippe said, providing something different. We're doing really big deals with folks like Toyota and KitchenAid, where we're helping them reach audiences in a variety of different ways. And going forward, we want to lean into that. The challenge is, one of the things we should probably talk about as an example is data. Like, in order to really do this the right way, you need as much data as possible. Part of what we're talking about in the ISA, we talk about measurement and other things. Look, if the platforms want to grow, they need better programming. They need programming that fits fast. They want us to be the ones investing in it because a lot of those platforms aren't content producers. We need the data to produce better programming. We need the data to be able to sell more advertising at a higher rate. It will only help them. Yet, we have a bunch of situations where we're not getting access to that data. Sometimes it's because of privacy. We're, of course, all very sensitive to privacy, but it's not mutually exclusive. So, I'm sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but you see where I'm coming from in terms of how we're differentiating, how we're trying to, build a bigger business, and we just all need to work together to build a healthier ecosystem.
Yeah, I'll throw the same.
We're working on,
go ahead, Chris.
We're working on 4 different co-productions with 4 different platforms, because to Cameron's point, they're all at some point saying to themselves, geez, we got all the same channels the other guys. How do we distinguish ourselves, right? Like, what's old is new again. And, before launching Gusto, I was making television shows for other broadcasters for, years. And, you do co-productions between broadcasters, right? So you do a UK, US co-production. Now it's with platforms.
So just to clarify, so you're making different shows for different distribution partners that would air on your channels on their platforms?
So we're making shows. Doesn't matter, I'm making shows. So if there's a show that resonates with a particular platform partner, we co-produce it, we split the costs, we leverage Canadian tax credits. So now we're making a show for 30 cents on the dollar each. In some cases, we first window it on their O&O, and then second window it on Gusto, because I'm making shows anyway. So we have new content coming down.
So, and it helps that platform partner differentiate themselves,
distinguish itself from the other ones.
What you're hearing is as we talked about at the beginning, here are the innovators re-innovating the windowing model, right? Like going back to tactics that, like Chris said, are not necessarily brand new in the grand history of Hollywood, but certainly have not really been talked about much in an era when everyone, when certainly the big media companies were all trying to land grab their piece of a streaming pie. Tastemade is no different. We think of that as well on the co-production side. We're also thinking about it on the back end. I have now hundreds of episodes of shows, and I'm getting incoming calls to syndicate those series. And it's caused us to think about, okay, how can we rethink? We thought for a long time, we got to hold on to all these rights. It justifies our branding. And now we're thinking, okay, can we extend our brand through this? This stuff is sitting on our balance sheet. Can we generate income from it in ways that benefits us and then hopefully leads people back to us? To that point, I do think that AVOD and other distribution models become incredibly important to the future of this, especially on the discoverability side. If you want to see the future of what a channel looks like, we're used to a channel from the old school days being just something that shows up on the EPG. A channel from the social media days is a YouTube channel. I highly recommend everyone spend some time looking at those YouTube channels that have primetime channels in them. The NFL is obviously the big one. There are many others, including Tastemade, that have a primetime channel on there. This is what a channel looks like in the future. It is a branded page with free and paywalled content. It has short form and mid form content that's distributed in various different ways. It's merchandised in such a way to clearly lead you into a paid experience, but you can consume that content whichever way you want. The key to that, like Cameron was saying, you are familiar with the brand and you're coming there to be able to interpret, to consume from that brand.
I would just add, I agree with what was said, that the big question right now is, where is the content living? should it really just stay on your channel, on your platform? And to go back to the branded content question, we one of our shows, Inside the Black Box, did very well on Crackle. But as you know, every year, every time you renew a show, you got to make it bigger and better. And a sponsor, the General Insurance, was eager to see more scale, and so we did the deal with Fox Soul, for example, where we distribute the show with them, and vice versa today. Because I guess we have a lot of experience in promoting brand content on Crackle and generating a lot of interest for it. We are in discussions with at least 5 different companies who have shows and with brands, ready to go and shows ready to be produced. And what they lack is distribution and a platform where they can actually find an audience. And so we're helping them find their audience, whether it's on Redbox or on Crackle, or on Chicken Soup for the Soul, for example. So I think there is more creativity, again, to support this content creation and distribution. And we are all, producers and distribution companies now, not only just, fast channel programmers. And I think we keep adding more and more diversity to our business models.
And this gets to a thesis that I've been kind of growing of late, which is I think it's, fast is one thing, YouTube is another, you have all AVOD is another, SVAD, subscription video with ads is another, virtual MVPDs is another. I think it's important for programmers, especially programmers from the niche point of view, to look at, a unified CTV strategy and social strategy. To not, to look at kind of husk and all for your IP and not, stop at the one platform you've been used to for, for all the points you're making. Is that really the approach you think you guys are approaching now? And Marion, I would throw that to you. Are you seeing that kind of take hold in the territories that you're covering as well?
So I don't know, guys, but most of the clients I work with, again, very lean, very nimble, which, is great to go fast some places, but it's hard to go fast in many places, right? So I've seen a lot of companies historically very focused on SVOD, struggling to make the jump to, ad supported, whatever the way. YouTube becomes, another ball game, or the other way around, right? Someone from YouTube or Twitch, looking to expand the life cycle of the great content they produce and, make the move to TV. I'm thinking, Jelly Smack and the likes. So I think there's still a lot of, work to be done. And the challenge is the fragmentation, right? Because even if you want to go do all of those things, very quickly, there's this technological challenge. Even if Chris was saying it's so much cheaper and easier than it was, maybe 10 years ago, it's still a challenge to, maintain an app within, X ecosystem, have a fast channel syndicated on 20 channels, etc., etc. So I love the goal. I think we need to work towards that, but I think it is extremely difficult. And I think Isa, I don't know if it's on your list, but standardization at some level, I think would be a good thing to add, right? It's going to power the distribution.
Great.
Thoughts on this unified CTV strategy? Let's just talk about kind of maybe the North American market. Cameron, is that how you're approaching things? Kind of seeing YouTube, social, fast, and AVOD as different spokes off the same IP hub, or are you prioritizing one over the other?
Yeah, I think that's about right. And I think Marion used the word earlier on flywheel, and we talk about the flywheel all the time because of all the different ways that we can distribute our content. So there's a lot of discussion around how you time that and how you introduce your different audiences. Ultimately, you got to let the audience decide how they want to consume your content. You can't just sort of shove it down their throats. And what I would just say, especially with this group, I think everybody will say the same thing. You have to experiment. I think, especially television, sometimes television is people think it's so precious, right? And ultimately, we now live in a world where a lot of the barriers to competing in the space have fallen significantly. You have to test, you have to try new things. It's why I've been on this rant about the EPG. Like, you know, we're in the middle. We have to grow the pie, and ultimately technology has to be part of how we do that. This idea that we're taking channels off of platforms, and they can call it curation. I'm all about curation. We're curating billions of videos across YouTube, right? Like, it's a huge thing for us. But ultimately, choice is what the audience wants. They just want an easy way to find the stuff that they're interested in. And the fact that we are all living in this 60-year-old, 70-year-old EPG world, like, look at all the platforms. I think someone said they're all very different. I don't think so. I think they're very similar, and they've been
and they look, as you said, they still look like an IPG from 10 years ago on cable.
I thought, like, with Amazon and Google and some of these players involved, like, we now live in the world of AI. Like, if you can't figure out recommendations in a way that's going to grow the pie for everybody, I would just be absolutely shocked. It's there. I just don't know if we have the right people focusing on it, because ultimately, to me, that solves a lot of problems. It solves the diversity and inclusion problem. It should solve the data problem. It should solve the pipes problem. Like, we have to create a better entry point, because more content is good, more voices are good, and otherwise we're just kind of going around circles. It's Groundhog Day.
Well, so this gets to two questions that Beth has in the Q&A, which is one, AI. How do you use AI to help with discoverability? And then B, she asked a question about, focusing on Gen Alpha and other demographics, which again is a data problem. Like, to a certain extent, you're not even really sure who's watching, on FAST. You get very little information at all, if any, from the platform partners. And then, to go to earlier points around demand and selling on the buy and sell side, like, how do you, as a group, ISA, and I know, part of it is banding together and speaking with one voice, but how do you force the changes that are necessary, whether it's better? I mean, the whole ecosystem is capped by its limitation on data. The whole ecosystem is capped based on its limitations on discoverability. How do you get the platform partners, and we don't have to call out any of them because it's kind of a universal fault across the entire spectrum, how do you get them to change their ways and make these improvements? Because to answer Beth's point, no, you can't use AI on these platforms because these guys aren't, no programmers in charge. It's the platforms that are in charge.
You got to partner with them. So, like, when we announced the ISA, there were a lot of eyebrows raised. There were lots of questions about, what is this thing? Is this collective bargaining, et cetera? So it's not. Like, this is a group of folks, like, to the earlier point, we've been in this thing for a while. We want a partner, right? We want to work closely with all the players in the ecosystem, whether it's a platform, a DSP, an SSP, maybe it's an AI scheduling company, and they have a great solution. What we're trying to do is shine a spotlight on these issues, and then we want to sit down and talk to folks that want to try to innovate, right? So there are platforms out there that want to sit down, and maybe they could work with a bunch of folks that we're willing to invest our time and resources to help try to solve these problems. So it really is sitting down and showing through data that this is like moving in these like providing this data. I don't know what the data is, but let's say we could sit with a platform and they could give us data around programming. Certain data could help us improve programming significantly. Like, do I invest in this show or that show? Did that cold opening work or not work? Like, did the advertiser get their content seen? Like, there's a ton of things that will help them and help us. They need partners to do that, right? And we want to do it in a way where we can capture the results and share it with the industry, and hopefully try to accelerate some of these changes.
You guys chose to work with iSpot from a kind of measurement standpoint. Can one of you explain why you chose them as a partner versus VideoAmp or ComScore or someone else?
It was really a natural conversation with them as we started talking to companies in the ecosystem and calling for allies. Basically, we're looking to build a whole group of allies for independent streamers. And iSpot jumped on the opportunity, and they had the ability to help us measure our audience very quickly across the entire group of members. And they were fantastic, and they helped us demonstrate that if you
The
aggregate
size of the audience,
the
yeah.
size of the audience of all these independent channels, which, some would look at and say, yeah, that's negligible, right? It's small. And then, but the richness of the content and the originality of the content and the diversity of the audience, plus the scale, suddenly makes it actually a much more exciting media to be in versus, the Baywatch channel.
Which is what brands and advertisers want, right?
That's
Right.
Right. So
Unless
They
it's
want the
unless it's
environment. The environment
programmatic,
does
and
it.
then
As
unless
Cameron
it's
said, we want
programmatic,
to
and then they don't
demonstrate
even
to
know where they're
platforms.
advertising.
We want to demonstrate to platform, we want to demonstrate to clients and SSPs that it's in their best interest to work with us because they will make more money.
We do have a question here from Nora, which I want to answer, which is, can you summarize what are the leading distribution platforms for FAST? So this, based on data I have, this is the rankings that I have right now. So Samsung TV Plus #1, Roku channel #2, Pluto #3, Tubi #4, Freevee #5, LG channels #6. Is that how you would rank them based on what you're seeing in your data, or is there a different hierarchy from your point of view?
is that US?
That is US. No, that is worldwide. That is worldwide. So I apologize.
Depends on your definition as well, because you're looking at Evan, I think you have written about this yourself, about the importance of semantics in this. There are those who consider on demand to be part of the FAST.
That's true. So Tubi gets an advantage there. Yeah.
Yes. I think obviously if you include on demand viewing, I think Tubi probably rises up in those rankings. I'll tell you how we think about this at Tastemade. It's pretty difficult to bet against device manufacturers. Anybody who has purchased a Samsung television in the past year or two, you know why Samsung TV Plus was the first word out of Evan's mouth just now. There's a TV Plus button on the remote. TV Plus is all over your home screen. It auto plays TV Plus channels if you go idle on your home screen for a while. They are pushing it like crazy, along with, by the way, branding TV Plus all over the platform. They don't do a ton of off-platform marketing, but when you're on that platform, you know what TV Plus is.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
Oddly, they always lead with the fireplace channel, but whatever.
Yeah, me too as well. So I think you have to bet on the OEMs for sure, and then start to think about which of those are going to exist and in what capacity, who's going to acquire who, let's say, over the next 5 years. The other thing is, like, let's just call a spade here. Google generally wins. So when Google has an operating system in Android TV that comes with fast channels, that is free, and comes and other device manufacturers start to sign on to that, at least globally, I think we can expect Google and Amazon
absolutely
to be significant players in this in the long term.
I agree. And then the other part of Nora's question is, well, who do you think in 5 years is going to be the top rankings? I completely agree, Evan. I think it's probably going to be some combination of Amazon, Freevee, and Google, because they're operating systems, because they also control television sets, and they're spending billions and billions of dollars to get those sets and those operating systems out there. There was a really good question around diverse audiences and creators here from Robert Jones. He asked a question about if I had a disabled veterans owned business and I wanted to move into OTT and streaming, what would the best piece of advice that you could give someone like that, or some other non-traditional creator from a diverse background? What would you say to them? And I would go around the horn and offer this up to anybody.
I think a number of clients and ad agencies have made an effort in the last few years to really allocate budgets dedicated for certain, minorities and
especially for veterans at this point too. Yeah,
exactly. And so there is an opportunity, I think, for content creation and coming up with concepts that they would support. And then, of course, it goes back to finding distribution for it. And I think, partnering with probably one of us, or someone who has, who's flexible and creative and nimble would be a good way to go about it. And then maybe creating some kind of IP or creating some kind of show that then, moves on to the bigger platforms. Might be a way
I think that's a really interesting thing. I think especially for audiences or creators from those types of communities, going direct to brands who have budgets allocated for certain audiences and certain creators, I think is a great idea. That brings up another question. And I asked this of all of you. What do you think about branded channels as a concept? So either pop-up channels around specific times of year, or actually working with brands to create brand-driven channels. Have you had conversation with brands like that? Do you see brands? I mean, because branded content has been great, but to your point, Philippe, like sometimes you can't get distribution for it, right? It's nice to make a piece of branded content, but if it falls in the forest and no one's around to see it, doesn't make a noise. So do you, and I would ask this of Marion as well, do you see the conversation around branded channels, pop-up channels, or long-term branded channels getting into the vernacular when you talk to agencies or brand managers or even platforms?
There've been this conversations. We definitely did branded trays, for example, on AVOD services, and so that's a bit more typical because you can do a collection of shows and build really an offering around the topic or segment. I haven't seen really any kind of fast channels that were branded.
No, I haven't either yet. I'm wondering if that might be something that kind of comes.
It's part of the future. It's going to be the future, 100%. Look, I don't know who decided that we were going to do commercial breaks in television shows when we moved into streaming. Evan was talking about the old EPG. The very first television commercial was July 1st, 1942. And we've been monetizing our content exactly the same way ever since, right?
Yes, identically,
we put up content that we pretty sure you're going to like until we interrupt it with content that we know you're going to hate. And we hope you stick around to watch the content that we are reasonably sure that you like. Why are we doing that? If you really want to create a relationship with the viewer, as opposed to call them a user or the last letter in ARPU, if you really want to create loyalty, why are we interrupting the programming that we all put so much time and effort into with commercials for term life insurance and walk-in bathtubs? Like, what?
I agree. It makes no sense.
The whole thing has to evolve and change and grow. And certainly other Evan I'm sure would agree with me, other Evans here, is that food is a genre that naturally lends itself to product integration,
absolutely,
sponsorship and stuff without compromising
and commerce
the creative of the show.
And the devices that you're playing on have absolutely the ability to talk to the phones that the people we know are holding in their phones and create commerce opportunities as well. Cameron, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just think it really depends on the construct of what a channel is, because I think Evan sort of highlighted that we have to come up with different constructs. Like today, the traditional channel, you need 400 hours of programming, right? There are very few brands that can support that in a way that is going to make that a really compelling viewing experience. I mean, look, GoPro was really arguably one of the first, I think, that did something really interesting, but the content itself was almost the product, right? It was just so closely aligned. I just think we got to get more creative with what we like. I think there's lots of things we can do with brand advertisers. I think going back to the previous question, look, I get approached all the time. I'm sure all of us do. Like, how do I launch my FAST channel? It's really hard right now. Like there are, I don't know, 4,000 channels out there, especially with folks that look, they may have great brands and they may have a very small library of content, but they don't have it's going to take time to build that library. They can try to license it. A ton of different, I think folks need to think about blocks of programming, right? Is it a pop-up block of programming brought to you by a brand, or a block of programming that aligns really well with a specific audience during a certain time of year? Those sort of things. I think we got to get more creative, and it kind of goes back to this paradigm we're just constantly running into, which is channels and EPGs. And I'm really, I'm pushing. I want the ISA to push for a different paradigm, because we're holding ourselves back in terms of audience, in terms of reach, revenue.
Absolutely. Well, this was a great panel, full of really smart people saying really smart things. I could do this for another 2 hours, but I think your relatives and families wouldn't love that. So I'm going to let you go now. I'm going to release you from your servitude. Thank you very much. Our winner of the song contest was Robert Jones. The song was Beatles, Rain, Take 5. And so that was really good. This is the end of Streaming Media Connects 2023. Really crucially, look for all the content from this week on Streaming Media Connects YouTube channel. most of it is already up there from the week, but all of it will be there at some point, either tomorrow or by Monday. Secondarily, please circle the dates for May 20th through 22nd for Streaming Media NYC right here in New York at the Intercontinental Hotel. I'm going to be hosting and sharing. It's going to be amazing. Submit your ideas for panelists and speakers right now. I want to thank Steve for producing the heck out of this conference. I want to thank these panelists for being so brilliant, and all of our panelists and speakers all week. I want to thank Streaming Media for making this conference happen. And thank you all for participating. It was a really blast, and I'll see you all soon. Steve, did I forget anything? Okay, good. Bye, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving
Thanks.
to those who celebrate it
Good to
in
see everybody.
France. Bye.
Cheerio.